Today we're going to be looking at a new technique where we reflect our half croquis, or it could be a fashion flat or trade sketch. But in this example we're going to do our croquis. I'm working on a plus size croquis to be used for drawing fashion flats. Okay, with this croquis, first of all you've got to draw your centre line. With your centre line, you could use a guideline instead if that's what you prefer, because then it has the snap to qualities, which is amazing. Okay, so the first thing with that is that you've got to go Control R to bring up your ruler. As you can see, the ruler is here now. And you would click and you would drag your guideline out to the centre. Then you would lock it into place. I'm not wanting to do that because I've created a centre line. Once I've done that, I'm going to draw half my croquis. Once you've got your croquis in place, you're going to then click on O on your keyboard so you can get the reflect option. See how it's brought up that little icon so you know exactly what function you're in. I'm going to then come up to my center anchor point here, and you can see that it has, as I hover above it, it says intersect. So I'm going to click on that. That's now, as you can see, put that as my axis, my pivot point. I'm going to now place my hand on the Alt on the keyboard, and as you can see, my cursor goes from being a black-headed to a double-headed. So when we put our finger on the Alt, it creates a duplicate function. Now if I was down here in this white area instead of on the black line, when I go to click and drag, it would just think it's a white area just like this and this. So I wouldn't be grabbing and reflecting anything. So I've got to make sure I'm clicking on something. So I'm going to click on the shoulder, and I'm going to click, hold and drag up and over. And as I come around to the other side, I'm going to now place my finger on the shift button. This will snap it into place. When you put your finger on the shift, it allows the rotation to work in increments of 45 degrees. So once it's all snapped into place, I'm going to release my mouse first and then my fingers off the keyboard. And that's what happens when you're doing a secondary function involving your keyboard and your mouse. You always release the mouse first, that commits to the function, and then you release your hands off the keyboard. Now with both those sides done, you can see I've got one side and the second side. I'm going to go back to my original side because this is the side I'm going to edit from, and the reason for that is because I've drawn this side, so it's obviously my preferred side. This is not. So whichever side works for you is the best one. Then we're going to come over to the properties panel, so it might be under the libraries. If not, you come up to Windows and find it under here in properties. But we've got the properties, and we're going to come down to the global edit button. This is a fantastic technique to use, and I think you should be using it a lot more. So I'm going to click on the global edit. When we do this, it shows the reflected side as blue and the active side as red. Now there's a really important thing to consider before we do this. We're going to move over to our direct selection tool. Now if I was to click here, we will lose our global edit. The really important thing is that the active side must stay active. So if we're wanting to edit a point, what we want to do is we want to create a marquee. So that means the active side at no point was non-active. Now I could click and drag this up, and you see now how it works in perfect synergy. I'm going to go Control Z to undo that. And I might want to just move it a little bit. A really handy thing that I find for tweaking these sort of things where you just want it to be a very small thing is to go Control K. This brings up our preferences, and I can type in something like 0.5, and that will allow me to use the arrows on my keyboard, and I can just do very small increments if I so desire. So once I've done that, I could come down to somewhere like the waist, and the waist is actually something that often needs looking at because this is a plus size croquis that's been designed for doing trade sketches. I might decide that her waist is maybe a little bit smaller, and maybe it would be better if it was pushed out a little bit more in keeping with our customers' shape requirements. And as you can see, when you do it, when you're working in both sides, it allows you to see it as a total thing rather than when you only add a little increment to either side, you get a feeling that that looks right. But then when you reflect it, you go, oh, actually, that was too much. And as you can see, I've clicked off it now. So if I was to now select back, go back and try and marquee it, you can see I'm now blue. So if I click on that, it's no longer active. So if I come back to here and just Control Z so it's back to this stage, If I'm marking this while it's still active, while it's still red and active, I can do these crazy things to it. I might decide she needs more hips or any of those sorts of things. And then once that's finished, I can just click off it. So it's a really powerful tool for once you've got things coming along nicely. Hopefully you will enjoy, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.